Imagine a place where the people worship hundreds of gods and goddesses. But one day, suddenly, their king declares that there is only one true God. And then, he bans the worship of all the others. This is the story of Akhenaten. This was the home of the Nile, the river that cut a green ribbon through the golden emptiness, the river that kept Egypt alive. Along its banks, cities rose, crops grew, and temples towered. And inside those temples, the gods lived. Hundreds of gods if you counted every little spirit and local deity. Gods with falcon heads, gods with jackal faces, gods wrapped in mystery like onions wrapped in dry skins. They watched over every part of life, from birth to death, from river floods to the stars above. But then came one strange man, one Pharaoh, a king who decided that all of this was wrong. Too many gods, too much confusion, too much shadow. He would tear it all down. He would try to erase the gods themselves. His name was Akhenaten, and he was unlike any other ruler Egypt had ever seen. Akhenaten did not begin with that name. He was born as Amenhotep. Amenhotep IV, a son of Thebes, the great city of the god Amun. His father was Amenhotep III, one of the most powerful kings Egypt ever had. His mother, Queen Tia, was a woman of strong will and sharper eyes. As a boy, young Amenhotep must have grown up surrounded by statues, tall colossi of his father, carved lions with their mouths open in eternal growls, gold ornaments, priests chanting, dancers spinning in the torchlight. This was the Egypt he inherited, glittering, stable, full of gods and their priests. But Amenhotep IV was different. He did not look like the other princes in the carved reliefs. When we see him later on temple walls, his body is long, stretched, with a belly that sags like a loaf of risen bread. His chin points out. His lips are soft and heavy, his eyes almost dreamy. Historians still argue whether this was how he truly looked, or whether the art was meant to show something stranger. Because Amenhotep was dreaming of something stranger. Egypt loved its gods. They were everywhere. Amun, the hidden one. Ra, the blazing sun. Osiris, the green-faced lord of the dead. Isis, kind and cunning. Bastet with her cat smile. Sobek with his crocodile jaw. They filled the temples like bees in a hive, but the more gods there were, the more power their priests held, especially the priests of Amun. They were rich. They were influential. They controlled lands, labor, and treasure. Sometimes it seemed as though they were more powerful than the king himself. And perhaps young Amenhotep did not like that. Or perhaps he simply thought differently. He began to turn his eyes away from the many gods, away from the crowded pantheon, toward something simpler, something brighter, the sun. Not the god Ra exactly, but the sun's disk itself, the Aten, a round shining circle in the sky, with rays stretching down like fingers, sometimes ending in little hands reaching out to touch the earth. The Aten gave light. The Aten gave warmth. Without it, no crops grew, no people lived. Amenhotep began to worship the Aten above all others, and in time, he would decide the Aten was not just the highest god. The Aten was the only god. Around the 5th year of his reign, Amenhotep did something unusual. He changed his name. No longer would he carry the name of Amun, the old god. Instead, he would be called Akhenaten, which meant effective for the Aten, or more poetically, the one who works for the Aten. This was not just a name change, it was a declaration of war against the priests of Amun, against centuries of tradition, against the whole swirling hive of Egyptian religion. And he did not stop there. Akhenaten began closing temples. He ordered the names of certain gods to be erased, chiseled out of stone. He ordered statues smashed, inscriptions ruined. Amun's name especially was attacked, scratched out as if it had never been. For ordinary Egyptians, this must have been bewildering. Their lives were bound to the gods. They prayed to them for health, for children, for good floods. And now the king said they were gone, that only one god remained, a round circle in the sky. But kings were gods too, in their way. And Akhenaten was determined. But Thebes, with its great temples, was still the city of Amun. So Akhenaten did something even more extraordinary. He built an entirely new city. Far away, in a place where no god had been worshipped before, he laid out broad streets, palaces, gardens, and open-air temples. This was Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten. Today, we call it Amarna. It was a city of light. Unlike the old dark temples, the temples of Aten had no roofs. The sun had to shine directly on the altars. Offerings were left out in the open, where the Aten's rays could touch them. Akhenaten moved his court there. His wife, the famous Nefertiti, was always shown by his side. Together they stood beneath the sun disk, with its rays ending in tiny hands, touching their faces, offering them ankhs, the breath of life. It was a strange city, a strange vision, almost like a dream made solid in stone. And along with this new religion came new art. For thousands of years, Egyptian art had been rigid, formal, eternal. Kings were shown tall and strong, muscles like stone, faces like perfection. But under Akhenaten, the art melted. Figures were shown with long necks, round bellies, sloping shoulders. The king and queen were shown not as distant gods, but as tender parents. They kissed their daughters, cradled them, sat beneath the rays of the Aten like an ordinary family, except, of course, touched by the hands of the sun itself. Some statues show Akhenaten with almost alien features, wide hips, narrow chest, long face. Some say he had a genetic disorder. Others think it was just artistic style, a way to show he was different, both man and god, earthly and divine. But whatever the truth, the art of Amarna was like nothing before, and nothing after. It was a short, bright flame in Egypt's long history. And so, in just a few years, Egypt was turned upside down. The old gods cast aside, a new god raised up, a new city built, a new art style born. But dreams, even golden ones, do not last forever. Egypt was not only temples and gods. It was also an empire, rich with gold from Nubia, powerful over lands in Syria and Palestine, and these lands were restless. They wrote letters, carved on clay tablets, to their Pharaoh, pleading for soldiers, pleading for help. We still have some of those letters today, the Amarna letters. They are full of worry, cities asking for protection, vassals begging for troops. They speak of enemies at the borders, but Akhenaten seemed distracted. His attention turned inward to the Aten, to his city of sunlight, to his art and rituals. He sent few armies. He cared little for distant battles. The empire, once strong, began to fray like an old rope, and perhaps his people noticed. A king who did not guard his borders was no good king. A king who ignored tradition, who angered the old gods, was even worse. Imagine being a farmer in the reign of Akhenaten. You rose early, worked the fields, prayed for the Nile to flood. You made offerings to the gods of your ancestors, but suddenly the temples were shut. The statues hidden, the priests dismissed. You were told only the Aten mattered, but the Aten was far away, high in the sky, blazing and silent. Unlike Osiris, who promised life after death. Unlike Isis, who comforted mothers. Unlike Bes, the little dwarf god who kept babies safe at night, the Aten gave light to everyone, but he did not listen, he did not speak, he only shone. For ordinary people, this must have been unsettling. Religion had been woven into every breath of life. Now it felt like the threads were being pulled loose. And so, quietly, many Egyptians kept their old gods, whispering prayers in the dark, painting tiny figures in hidden corners. Faith does not vanish just because a king commands it. As the years passed, Akhenaten became more isolated. The images of him and Nefertiti multiplied. Always the royal family, always beneath the sun disk. It was as if the whole kingdom shrank into that one circle of life. The king, the queen, the daughters, and the Aten. Some of his children died young. Reliefs show scenes of mourning. And grief, like the desert, can stretch endlessly. There are whispers, though uncertain, that Akhenaten's beloved queen, Nefertiti, may have ruled beside him or even after him. Some say she vanished. Some say she became Pharaoh herself under another name. The truth is misty, like heat rising from sand. But Akhenaten himself grew more reclusive, more devoted to the Aten. He built and built. He prayed and prayed. And beyond the walls of Amarna, Egypt trembled. And then, one day, Akhenaten was gone. Whether by illness, grief, or simple passing, his reign ended. He had ruled for around 17 years, but the dream he built began to unravel almost immediately. After him came short-lived rulers, Shmenkara, perhaps Nefertiti, perhaps someone else. The records are uncertain, broken, and then came a boy king, a child no older than 9. His name was Tutankhaten, which meant, of course, the living image of the Aten. But very soon his name was changed to Tutankhamun, the living image of Amun. The old god restored, the old temples reopened, the old priests returned, blinking like owls after too long in the dark. The Aten was abandoned. Akhenaten, the shining city, was deserted. The sand rolled in, the walls crumbled. Within a generation, it was a ghost city. A dream turned to dust. The new rulers wanted to forget Akhenaten. They wanted to erase him, as he had erased the others. His name was hacked out of monuments, his images smashed, his memory cursed. For later Egyptians, he was not even counted among the kings. In a way, his plan had folded back on itself. He tried to erase the gods. But in the end, he was the one erased. And yet, not completely. The desert remembers. Archaeologists would one day find Amarna, its broken palaces and wide empty streets. They would find the letters, the statues, the strange art. And Akhenaten would rise again, at least in memory. And so, we come to the end of Akhenaten's story. He was a king who tried to change everything, to tear down the many and raise up the one, to carve sunlight itself into stone. His city shone for a brief moment, like a mirage on the horizon. And then, like a mirage, it vanished. What do we make of him? Was he mad, as some call him? A visionary, as others believe? A dreamer? A tyrant? A poet who tried to force his poem onto a whole nation? Perhaps he was all of these, perhaps none. But still, his memory lingers. His long face carved in stone, his strange art, his god who shone but never spoke. The Aten still rises every morning over the Nile. The same sun Akhenaten worshipped, the same rays falling down like little hands onto the earth. And if you stand quietly in the ruins of Amarna, you can almost feel them. Warm fingers on your cheek, the soft touch of a god who burned too brightly and faded too soon.